The credit ratings agency S&P has today warned state governments that a lack of spending discipline is threatening their credit rating. Business Editor Ross Greenwood joins me. And Ross, is this applicable to the federal government as well? Because, I mean, federal governments can do one thing. If states are still spending like drunken sailors, that affects inflation.
Oh, it does. It affects inflation. It affects the nation as a whole, its credit rating. Eventually, it catches up with the federal government as well. And the reason is, say, for example, you're going for a home loan or a business loan, whatever it might be, the banks don't have enough of a stock of Australians' savings here in the country. So they have to go overseas to borrow. And so when you're an overseas borrower looking at Australia, you look at Australia's ability to pay back that loan. And so it doesn't matter whether it's the government that's borrowing, which it does, or whether it's business borrowing or banks borrowing, somebody at some stage has got to make a decision about Australia. So that's what these credit ratings are all about. And so what they're saying is that basically since pre-COVID times, there's not a lack of revenue coming through the door. In fact, they're saying there's actually about $151 billion in extra revenue that's come through the door. But what they've said is this: lacks financial discipline in Australian states is stymieing planned budget improvements and squeezing their credit ratings. In other words, they're on watch to have their credit ratings cut. Now, if that happens, that also puts pressure on the federal government. Now, have a look at this. This is basically what they were expecting. And this is ultimately what happened, which is the top line. In other words, debt has spiralled, spending has spiralled. So they've got in an extra $150 billion, but they've spent an extra $212 billion on what they anticipated. So in other words, state governments around the country have effectively blown their budgets. And what that means is that when a bank or you wanting to get a home loan go out there to try and do that in the future, somebody overseas says, actually, you might be a bit more risky in terms of paying this back. So as a result, you might have to pay a bit more interest. So here's the credit ratings currently. You can see that the best credit rating is in WA, Western Australia, who's got a AAA credit rating. It's stable. New South Wales AA plus is negative. But what S&P today is doing is putting all of the states on notice that really their deterioration of their budgets could see all of these credit ratings going down. And that means really their ability to borrow in the future for big projects would be certainly curtailed.
All right, I spoke to Brand Black. He's the head of the BCA, and he was. Thank you. I'm glad you're watching. Yes. He was talking about, you know, his wish list essentially ahead of the election. We are well into the campaign, or at least the pseudo campaign now. Sure. He's talking about a government department to cut spending and cut red tape. This is essentially the Australian version of the American Doge right. That Elon Musk is running. I mean, what are the chances that either side is going to listen to this?
About zero.
Okay, cool.
Right. And I say that, you know, with all due respect, because let's be honest, the Labor government has not listened to the business community at all since it's been in power. In fact, I've put it to the Business Council and others that the government is anti-business. If you have a look at industrial relations policies, if you have a look at energy policies, if you have a look at tax policies, all of these basically have been designed to make Australia less competitive. Now, the government says that's not the case. Look at how much we've given on solar panels. We've put some money into supercomputers and critical minerals. Well, the fact is that's government giving handouts to certain key industries. It's actually not about what business wants, which is policies that really drive Australia's competitiveness. Yeah. The problem for Australia right now, and which is the message they should be trying to get across to government, is you've got to make Australia more competitive, especially against America, where they're cutting taxes, where energy bills are a third of the price of Australia, and where wages costs are less. And so what that means is any multinational companies in Australia are right now picking up their tent, picking up their forks and spoons, and leaving and going to America.
See, I wonder what the strategy is here as well, because at the moment, Labor, and this is more of a comment than a question to you, Ross, but you would have noticed it, that, okay, so Dutton's come out with a policy over the holidays where your bosses don't have to pay fringe benefits tax on a worker's lunch. Great. You know, a lot of people would look at that and go, whatever, that's a great idea.
Small beer, but, you know, okay.
Small beer, but great, like, whatever. But the government has decided to hammer that, saying, and the line is that Peter Dutton wants you to pay for your boss to take his mates out to lunch. Now, that's, of course, the politics of it all.
Which is not right, but that's the optics of it. That's the message you're trying to get across.
But my point is that, yes, I agree with you that government is anti-business. There's nothing, it's not in their top 10 of priorities. When you look at the energy system that's all about skewed towards net zero, not reliability or cost, which is the one thing that is going to drive investment
out of Australia. Drive it out of Australia. That's the problem. It's all about, and look, governments have got to understand this. If you've got a pot of capital right now, you've got it, I've got, anybody's got it. And if you've got a choice as to where you put that pot of capital, you're going to put it where you think you've got the best chance of making money. And like, say, for example, Albo and his whole thing about building 1.2 million homes, right? Just on a side.
Yeah.
The reason why he's actually way behind in those targets is because if you're a property developer, the risk of building a home right now is so high and the chance of making a profit on that is so small, you don't build. Now, the government says, we're going to get out there and we're going to give money to states and we're going to give encouragement.
So small fry. Right? Like, we're going to encourage, apprentices. Well, that's a supply chain thing. That's not going to come online for 3 or 4 years.
So the bottom line is if you want anybody to do anything in this country, you've got to give them a profit incentive to do it. And so as a result of that, if the government actually wants an extra 1.2 million homes built, guess what it has to do? It has to make conditions better for property developers who they don't like to actually go out there and build those homes. So you sit there and you say, well, you can't have it both ways on industrial relations and on energy prices and a whole bunch of other stuff, and then sit there and say, will you go and build us a whole bunch of new homes when there's no profit at the bottom line?
Yeah.
This is where the Business Council and others don't argue as effectively as they should.
Oh, I agree with that. Let's talk about tariffs now, because we're all seeing this through, it's Trump's world and we're just living in it at the moment. But this tariff reprieve, it's a 30-day reprieve, no tariff on Canadian goods and Mexican goods for a while.
For a little while.
Yeah, the ASX was pretty spooked yesterday. What's happened today?
It'll come back big time, like it did in America overnight. And the reason is because Donald Trump is a negotiator, let's be honest. This is all about the posturing of it. This is all about the art of the deal. This is all about Donald Trump. So from that point of view, it is going to certainly affect Australian markets today. But do bear in mind that Australia cannot pretend, just because we have a massive trade deficit with America, that we are immune. It's agricultural goods. It's on other types of goods that Australia might find itself in the firing line with. And conversely also, it may be that China starts to flood Australia with a whole bunch of cheap goods that they can't sell to America. So that also could be a consequence if there are tariffs in the future. But let's go to the markets and let you know how they look, because the Aussie dollar also has been hammered in the last little while. It got down to a 5-year low yesterday, into the 60s. Now, it's going under 60 at some stage, so it'll have a 5 in front of it shortly. It's up this morning, 62.2 US cents. So, don't think about it. Here it is over the past year. So you can see it really hasn't done anything over the past year as well, still hanging around that level. Go and have a look at the stock market now. There it is. It's up 0.5% already. So that's better off the back of what's happening in America overnight. So really, in some ways, little reprieve for Canada and Mexico and Australian share market investors.
Just quickly,
as well.
Any chance we're not getting a February rate cut?
Yep. There's a chance.
How big?
Look, it's there. I sense that they're going to cut it. That's what the markets are saying, 80% chance, whatever it is.
Okay.
But if you think about the discipline, about where it goes to in the future, there is a very strong argument that they should just keep it on hold for a longer period of time.
Okay, Ross.
Gotta go.
Thanks, I think. We'll see you soon.